Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for attending this keynote. So I'm Edward Wen from Hong Kong Xi'an University. So I wish to begin with a thank to Mohammed for inviting me for this exciting conference on second language studies. Mohammed has been a nice colleague to work with. We are currently working on 2 journals, Language Teaching Research Quarterly and individual differences in language education, a topic that I'm going to elaborate in today's keynote. So the title of my talk is Individual Differences in Second Language Acquisition, Where We Are and Where to Go. And I will focus mainly on research, including theory and texting. So let's see. So to begin with, we need to realize that L2 learning and teaching has always been a complex and dynamic system. That's why we may need to adopt a CDST approach. I wish to begin with my background in academic training. So I was doing my PhD with Professor Peter Skian in Hong Kong, Chinese U, back in 2004. And then I received some Mori scholarship to do experiment, to do research with Nick Alex at Michigan University, UMich. So I am deeply influenced by these 2 great scholars. So in my understanding, following their roots, second language acquisition or L2 learning and teaching is a very complex. It involves a lot of factors, as we can see. So we only focus on the learner for today's talk. And these include intelligence, language aptitude, and working memory, as these are the current research foci that I'm adopting. And we assume that these are influencing the learner's approach towards second language learning, which will lead to different outcomes. Of course, we are not saying that language learner individual differences are the only factor. There are many other factors, including the teacher's part, for example, the instruction provided by the teachers, and the opportunities for L2 use outside classroom, and particularly the social context. If we are thinking of the digital context, this is the new thing that we can add to this big picture. So that is the general picture that we need to bear in mind, even though we have just focused on very specific individual differences. So to achieve that, I hope that in the following 30 minutes, I will be able to cover 2 of my very enthusiastic research topic. One of them is foreign language aptitude, and the other is working memory. So individual differences seems to be very popular nowadays with new books, including these 2, one by Xiaofeng Li and the other by me and colleagues. So we're going to look at the research and the text of these. We don't have time to go to look at the multilingualism, but then it's another talk. Right, so let's briefly talk about intelligence before we move on to language aptitude. As we see, artificial intelligence is here to stay, right? So the general G, the G factor in psychology, which refers to the general ability in learning and problem solving. So intelligence started from the IQ to later the EQ, and later on the multiple intelligence by Howard Gardner. I was also particularly interested in the concept of successful intelligence by Robert Sternberger, in which he argued that successful intelligence or intelligence for successful life in college or in life, we need to have 3 levels: analytical intelligence, creative intelligence, and practical intelligence. I think practical intelligence is particularly relevant. So we don't need everybody to be creative, but we do need people who are learning and then become intelligent. So it's practical in new context. Another term that I'm very fascinated by, the concept of mindset by Carol Dweck from Harvard University. And Sarah Mesa and Stephen Ryan has talked about it in Foreign Language Learning in ELT Journal. So we are talking about the fixed mindset and the growth mindset, of course, in which the growth mindset will allow us to further improve. And of course, we don't have too much time to delve into the intelligence literature, but we can say that there are things to do in the future if we are interested in it. The first concept is what Robert Sternberg has called adaptive intelligence, in which we can adapt to the new situation. And particularly nowadays, where we have ChatGPT, we are asking questions like the artificial intelligence versus the human intelligence in second language learning. Right. And I'm thinking if it is mindset, perhaps before besides talking about fixed mindset and growth mindset, we may need to have what I call a transformative mindset for second language in the digital, or what we call AI-driven era. We need to embrace changes in our teaching and learning of a second language. But as time is limited, we won't have too much space and time for this topic. Now we move on to foreign language aptitude. Used to be referring to a special talent for learning a foreign language. As we know, it started in the United States in the early 1950s, but then it was silent in the 70s and 80s until it picked up some steam in the 2020, early 2020, the turn of the century, but then it recorded exponential growth in the past 20 years. So I still remember Roy Ellis in our new book was saying, so when he's published his first version of the second language acquisition Bible of the book in 2005, it only had 2 pages for language aptitude research. But then when he was revising it for the second edition in 2015, foreign language aptitude, he needed to write 7 pages to cover everything. So the growth is significant. Of course, when we talk about foreign language aptitude, we have to say the most famous framework is by John Carroll, and we call it the 4 factors, in which he identified the 4 most important factors in learning a foreign language. The first one is phonemic coding ability. In other words, our ability to code unfamiliar sound so that it can be retained in our phonological short-term memory. And then we need to have grammatical sensitivity, in which we need to identify the functions that the words are playing in different parts of the sentence. And then we need to have inductive language learning ability in order to what we call generalize from given corpus to create new sentences. Finally, it was the associative memory to form links or associative links in our memory. And I jump on this concept because this theory was first put forward in the 1950s But then in the 70s, working memory came about. So that's why I became interested in working memory research. So I followed my supervisor, Professor Peter Skier, who has developed this language aptitude theory by identifying the interlanguage developmental stages. For example, if we look at second language acquisition in terms of the three macro stages: input processing, central processing, output processing, each of the stage involves some embedded cognitive processes such as noticing the gap, right? And then pattern identification, feedback, and then in order to produce language, we need to avoid error or before we reach lexicalization, automaticity, etc. So if we look at second language acquisition in this developmental stage, we then can come up with corresponding aptitude components, including working memory and other abilities that are in the aptitude literature. So these are the what he called macro components, like handling sound, handling pattern, handling feedback, and handling automatization, etc. Imagine, like Lord Ellis has mentioned, it can be hypothesized that learners, if a learner is strong in phonetic coding ability, they may benefit from input-based forms of instruction, whereas those strong in language analytical ability may do better in consciousness raising instruction. So that's why we put ATI, aptitude treatment interaction, into real practice in classroom. Right. Following Peter Skian, another Peter Robinson, has also come up with a three-level framework for language aptitude, in which he identified in the core the 10 basic cognitive abilities, such as processing speed, phonological working memory capacity, etc. And then these are in combination to form aptitude complexes, such as noticing the gap, and also these in turn will influence the task when they are performing the task, and we call this the task aptitudes, right? And as a whole, these task aptitudes are making a difference or impact on our real life task. So in this way, language aptitude becomes a complex or complexes of abilities, which will have effect on our language task. So in terms of texting language aptitude, we know that the most famous one was AMLET in the 1950s, developed by J.B. Carroll, and it was also almost like synonymous with the language aptitude, the concept itself. And then we have the Pimsleur language aptitude text battery. Later, we have the NLF by Sternberg, based on texting the novelty, our ability to handle novelty and ambiguity. The two most recent ones are including Paul Miller's Llama and the new HiLab language aptitude text. So these are the two recent established ones. I mean, in terms of very recent papers, okay, we can identify, sorry, to go back a little bit, we can identify Professor Xiaofeng Li and Roberta Kesa has mentioned this implicit language aptitude, while Lanny Freeborn has tried to work on her thesis for the topic of CDST, or network analysis of language aptitude. And most recently, we have Anne and Emma Marston published a paper on an online version of the language aptitude text. So these different texts are all included in the two books that I co-edited with colleagues. The one is in 2019, published by Knowledge, while the recent one by Cambridge University Press. Okay, we're going to say more about this. As we know, the MLAT has 5 parts, which include number learning, phonetic script, spelling clues, words in sentences, which have been used a lot in current SLA research, and then paired associates. So these are the detailed, some examples of the text, which is MLAT is now put under the care by Charles Stansfield, okay, and you can pay and buy a version, right? But the most, if you don't have money to pay, you can try the free version, okay, by Paul Miller and Vivian, okay. So Paul has developed this Llama text as a free, and another feature of it is language neutral because it is based on icons like these. Okay, it's a user-friendly suite of aptitude texts that are incorporating 4 separate elements: Llama B, Llama D, Llama E, and Llama F. And it is free to download. And a lot of research has been conducted in second language acquisition, applying this Llama. And Karenina from Maryland University and Vivian Rogers have provided initial results regarding the factors which might influence Llama scores. And in particular, Vivian Rogers has validated and concluded that the results are robust, actually, of Llama, but still problems and still need to be solved in terms of validation. So you can have a try. Of course, the most comprehensive inferential one is the HiLab, which the HiLab battery is able to distinguish the best of the best, and it is making use of cognitive science and neuroscience in conjunction with applied linguistics. So it has used a lot of the concepts in working memory and long-term memory, implicit learning, etc. Unfortunately, it's not for public use, so the use is restricted. That's why the validation is not open to the public. But anyway, to summarize, the language aptitude effects on L2 attainment, the meta-analysis by Xiaofeng Li has found that among all the language aptitude studies in the past 50 years until 2015, the correlation is about 0.32, which is good enough, moderate, right? But more importantly, he found that there are 2 types of studies, predictive and interactional ones. Interestingly, MLAT is still the most popular and the best performer among all the existing language aptitude texts, even outperforming HiLab. And of course, as I said, Llama is the most popular nowadays because it is free to download and user-friendly. Different choices. In the recent chapter in our recent book, Peter Skin has tried to come up with a 2-dimensional framework for analyzing the language aptitude text and subtext. And as you can see, the first is the language cognition rating, and the other one is implicit to explicit. Through this diagram, we can see that there are 3 areas that need to be further designed in terms of aptitude text. These include cognitive explicit pattern learning, implicit language pattern learning, proceduralization, both of language and cognitive patterns. So these are the empty areas that need to be covered. And then based on these, there are two basic questions that need to be answered in future research. Number one, does language aptitude implicate language? And if so, to what extent? So actually, Peter has discussed this in greater detail in his 2019 book chapter. And then the second question is, what are the respective roles of explicit declarative knowledge, explicit learning, and memory in relation to implicit knowledge, implicit learning, and implicit memory? So again, the dichotomy between implicit and explicit has always been in existence in not just language aptitude research, but also in second language learning as a whole. As far as I see it, okay, language aptitude research needs to be put into perspective, and what I call an integrative model, which has three stages. Stage one is the texting phase. Stage two is the theory construction phase. So we try to explain the score rather than just predict. And of course, predict is important, but we also need to explain the underlying mechanism. And finally, we need to apply the theory for our practice. So that is important. So in the future, we can further research how language aptitude develop, and we can adopt a new imagenic and epigenetic model, or we can also, another perspective that is getting some prominence is the what I call the polyglots, or in the future we can even think about a double exceptionality or twice exceptionality. Okay, so in other words, some talented language learners may be poor in certain areas. So this is another phenomenon. If you're interested in language aptitude research, of course, personalized learning and digital learning, we are going to talk about it very soon. So the second individual differences research that I'm going to talk about is my 20-year enthusiasm, which is working memory. I'm so interested in it and enthusiastic about it that I was even nicknamed by some scholars as WME, Working Memory Edward. Okay, you can call me WME. Okay. So working memory generally refers to the cognitive ability to temporarily store and process information simultaneously in our head. But as the information, okay, gets overloaded nowadays, our working memory is extremely limited. As we can see, it is limited in capacity in terms of span. We can only remember about 4 to 7, okay, chunks or digits, etc. So if we can chunk better, more efficiently, we can increase it, but normally it's around 4 to 7. And also, we can only remember things in our immediate consciousness for around 20 seconds. Otherwise, it will be gone forever, right? So this is what Morton, okay, Christensen has called the now or never bottleneck effect. In other words, is very what we call transient, okay, very short-term, okay, memory thing. So that is the major, or what we call the signature feature of working memory. Of course, when we are talking about working memory, long-term memory plays an integral role. As I always joke about people, with people, Hong Kong is the gateway to China in the past. I mean, everything goes to China has to pass Hong Kong. Everything goes to Hong Kong from China has to pass Hong Kong to the world, right? So, but nowadays, of course, things have changed, but still working memory in a similar way is a gateway to long-term memory. Everything we learn, it has to pass working memory before it become part of our long-term memory knowledge. Okay, so it may help make changes to our long-term memory. If you think about language proficiency or language knowledge as long-term memory, then we need working memory to make changes to it. This has significant implications for theory and practice. For example, Alloway has always emphasized that working memory can be a new intelligence. It can even do better than standard intelligence text, IQ text, right? And so as a enthusiastic researcher of working memory, now that we have ChatGPT and AI, I have tried to ask the question, does AI have a working memory similar to human? And I tried it out with my ChatGPT, and it gave me the answer. Yeah, it has a even better working memory, which is equal to about 2048 tokens, which is larger than human working memory. We only have about 4 to 7 chance. And the last one, of course, if it is so, nowadays we are surrounded by this data. This reminds me of the talk by Zhisheng, who is the CEO of NVIDIA at the Computex gathering in Taiwan just 2 days ago. Right, nowadays the data is overloaded, right? While our CPU, if we consider our working memory as a CPU of the computer, is overloaded. It's overloading information. So is there a way to accelerate our working memory similar to what Zhisheng has been doing, to accelerate the CPU with the GPU graphics processing unit, which is the core technology for today's AI, right? So these are the interesting questions for enthusiasts to think about. If you're interested, think about it, right? And of course, conversely, we can also think about what we can do to reduce working memory load, or as some cognitive psychologists has called, this is cognitive offloading. Nobody has talked about this in second language. I think this is an interesting idea, but we have thought about the reducing our working memory burden, as we'll see very soon. So in terms of working memory, the most famous model is by Alan Bentley, and in this multimodal store model, working memory consists of 4 components: the visual spatial sketchpad handles visual spatial materials, and then the phonological loop, which is dealing with sound. So that's why it is most directly relevant to language learning. I mean, as early as 1998, they even call it the language learning device. And I like this idea a lot because it is playing a very important role in novel phonological forms, which will influence our vocabulary learning, etc. So that is the key model, the key insight from this model. Of course, it was already 50 years. So John Taos and colleagues are actually guest editing a special issue to mark this 50th anniversary of this model. And I was fortunate to attend the 40th anniversary at the International Conference on Working Memory in Cambridge back 10 years ago. That's when I met Professor Alan Bentley and began some interesting collaborations. We recently published a book on the influence of Alan Bentley, and this is the book that we have published with colleagues from all around the world, right? Okay, so the second model of working memory is Nelson Calvin's, the embedded process working memory model, in which we need to highlight that it is mainly the important concept of focus of attention, or focused attention, in which we have only about 4 digits, 4 plus minus 1, around 3 to 5 digits. So this is a limited working memory in terms of the focus. The third one is the interesting model by Randy Engel and colleagues, which is called the attentional control model, okay, which has been shown to explain a significant amount of variance in L2 learners' proficiency. Okay, speaking proficiency, L2 phonological processing and interpreting. So this is still new in second language acquisition research. You are more than welcome to apply this model to second language acquisition research. And for my own part, I have tried to summarize everything together and come up with this integrated framework of working memory in second language or in language research, in which it has 4 levels. Layer 1 is the long-term memory, which includes our L1 and L2. And then the second level is working memory components. And the third one are working memory cognitive processors. And the fourth level are the real-world working memory texts that are tapping into the different processors that are indicating the working memory components that are connected with our long-term memory. So I was hoping that through this framework, we have a better understanding of the what we call working memory language nexus, the relationship. And based on previous research, I also came up with what I call the phonological working memory or executive working memory or PE model, in which we try to demarcate the different influences by phonological working memory as opposed to executive working memory. For example, phonological working memory seems to be more relevant for acquisitional or developmental aspects of SLA, while executive working memory are more related to the skills, monitoring, noticing, self-repair, etc. for the processing part. So one is the storage, the other is the processing part. So these are still need to be further refined in future research. But overall, if we look at the overall effects of working memory, so it can explain, okay, the correlation is around 0.255 to around 0.23, for example. So these are the general is positive, moderate, but not too impressive, which I think partly because of the working memory text and the language proficiency measures that we are adopting. So I'm not too discouraged, but I think it plays a significant role in SLA in particular. So I have a bigger dream for working memory in my upcoming research. So I believe that as Chomsky has argued, UG is important. All other things, okay, like what he called external, like grammatically irrelevant conditions as memory limitations, distractions, shifts of attention and interest, and errors, etc., are not. They are peripheral, are not central. So perhaps he may be wrong. Okay, as we say, we are seeing converging evidence that memory limitations, remember the magical number 4 or 7, are actually hidden in our grammar. We are going to see some examples, and they may be influencing the acquisition and character of language from our word formation, phonology, sound, to our grammar structure, okay, and thus rendering working memory as a new candidate of language aptitude, a new central part of language aptitude, and becoming part and parcel of our language acquisition device. So in this case, perhaps we need to revisit Chomsky's language acquisition device. For example, whenever you are talking, okay, and you identify the head noun, okay, the head verb, okay, the head word, and before and after, it should not has more than 7 words. Otherwise, you have no friends, right? So this is the general, okay, pattern uh, uh, for us to see that working memory is at work. And of course, in recent years, we have the dependency grammar, which are cross-linguistic, and it is also almost universal that the maximum, okay, dependency is below 4, which is the magical number 4. So, and we put it as the instant chunk number. In other words, is this the online processing, the focus, if you still remember, focused attention in language processing is no more than 4, while the perceptual, okay, or the momentary chunks at short-term memory is around 7. So for the very first time, we put, okay, the magical number 4 and magical number 7 in context with language and grammar processing. And in our previous research, we have found that these are already evident in quite a number of different languages. And in the future, we will look at all the world's languages to see if this is so. And I believe they should be so. Prove us wrong if it is not, right? So in my current project, I'm thinking of a new book, which is entitled, okay, The New Language Acquisition Device, How Working Memory Shapes Human Language Structure and Processing. And a lot of work to do to argue that working memory shapes our language structure. So to summarize, so working memory can be the new intelligence, better than our IQ, and it has compared with AI, you can think about that. So we can see this is what we call an extended or a distributed working memory model possible, or as we have recently published another paper on affective working memory, it can have relationship with our affective emotion, okay, maintaining effective, okay, emotion. So that is something we need to think about if you are interested in it. Finally, in terms of practical implication, we are talking about second language acquisition. In one of my research area is task-based language teaching, a good tradition from my supervisor, Peter Skian. And Royalist also has mentioned that perhaps working memory is one of the 3 key cognitive constructs underlying L2 task-based performance. The other 2 being attention control and noticing, and then focus on form. And my question is how, okay, how working memory contributes to task-based language teaching. And so we can, that is how, right? So particularly, I want to emphasize that a lot of the task literature, which includes task design features, task implementation, etc., are actually possible ways or potential means to reduce our working memory burden. For example, we give time to plan, which allows us to reduce the working memory load, the task features, the task topic familiarity, noticing, and then scaffolding. All these, including translanguaging, we try to reduce their working memory. So these can be a very promising direction. And as a matter of fact, in the very recent paper by Erickson, Mackey, and colleagues, published in SSLA, they have identified top 5 most common individual differences in task-based language teaching, which includes motivation, of course, is already there, always there. Okay, not very interesting for me. But working memory is number 2, and L2 proficiency, anxiety, and language aptitude. So there is also this new edited book by my friend. Okay, so for me, who has a lot of interesting chapters discussing the individual differences in task-based language teaching and learning. So for my part, I'm currently writing another chapter with my good old friend, okay, Mohammed Ahmadian. Okay, we published the 2019 volume in TBLT in honor of Peter Skin. So we are working on this chapter on individual differences in task-based language teaching. Okay, so anyway, I'm trying to argue that working memory as language aptitude. So task-based language teaching is one such key domains that we need to handle. So let's sum up what I have talked about. So as we know from the very beginning of my talk, there are a number of individual differences, but we only focus on two, which is language aptitude and working memory. We are not saying the others are not important. They are just, I mean, life is limited after you have researched working memory for 20 years. The only lesson that I learned is our working memory is limited, our attention is limited. So we can't focus too much on too much things, only two or three, right? So motivation, yeah, is interesting, but so many people have done interesting research and it's the number one. Okay, yeah, that's fine. But then the rest are also interesting. If you are interested, you can see language aptitude is almost as high as motivation. But actually, I think it is more interesting for as far as I see. Okay, and working memory, it is not as impressive as motivation and language aptitude, but it has its. I mean, it has its own. I have my own reservations in terms of the text of working memory and the measures of the second language proficiency, etc. Right. So potential challenges in theorizing and measuring these individual differences is difficult to know which are fixed, which are changeable. So a general approach, I think, is valid is to adopt a CDST or complexity theory approach, right? Put forward by Nick Ellis and Diana Freeman. And the other one is always the explicit implicit dimension of language aptitude subtext. And the third one is the domain specific versus domain general. In other words, as Peter Skin has asked, okay, to what extent is language aptitude domain specific, meaning language focused, and domain general, cognition focused. So language and cognition, this is two core. Okay, as far as I see, okay, language learning involves both domain specificity and domain generality. So including language aptitude and working memory. People have always said working memory is general domain, but I believe it is both, right? For example, the phonological loop is handling domain-specific sound-based materials, while executive working memory is more to do with the general cognitive processing. And finally, what about the roles of individual differences in today's increasingly digital language learning? This is an AI-driven era that we need to think about. So there are other challenges I'm not going to talk about, which against the deadly sins, the 7 deadly sins as put forward by Nebraska. Okay, and I think second language acquisition research is doing slightly better than cognitive linguistics in the most of the areas in terms of research, in terms of the scenes. And then despite that, we still need to think about the role of L1, particularly in nowadays, we are talking about equal or equitable multilingualism, bilingualism, as Lourdes Ortega has argued for. So in our view, the reluctance to consider the evidence on L1, L2 relationships has created a lacuna when attempting to explain individual differences in students' ultimate levels of L2 aptitude and acquisition. Okay. My recent research interest is translanguaging, which Professor Li Wei and Ophelia Garcia has mentioned that our mother tongue or our first language is not a first language, but it's one repertoire. So we are talking about a multilingual, okay, scenarios are things like we are translanguaging. So this is a change of mindset in our research. So as far as I see, the future of research in individual differences is personalized learning. Okay, as Patrick Wong has mentioned in his epilogue chapter for our 2019 book, the time is now ripe for personalized learning. Particularly, this was very, very timely now looking back in 2023, right? So we have this ChatGPT thing. Of course, in the framework, we need to rely on genetic, neural, and behavioral predictors that can be used to customize learning paradigms at the individual level. And then the research is not to find good learners, but to find what is being learned and how learning occurs individually. And we need to have these individual difference predictors under a particular learning paradigms. For example, we are going to show you an example of working memory and online lecture. We have recently done an experiment which shows that for high working memory people, it won't matter. But for low working memory people, if we have the appearance of the instructor on the screen, it helps them, right? So this is interesting. So that's why I hope that you can see my face while I am doing this Zoom talk. It should help. Of course, if you have high working memory, you don't need to care. But if you have low working memory, my face here helps you to understand my lecture more. So this is something interesting, right? So in the future, we can do more. So to summarize, this is the final slide. To achieve optimal learning for each individual learner, effective teaching should include the following three things. Number one, as usual, the general classroom learning. But then number two, we need to have some smaller tutorial sections that are tailor-made instructions. And finally, we need to have an adaptive e-learning or AI-driven platform for personalized additional learning, practice, and review. And we call this Intelligent Language Tutoring System, ILTS. This is the norm, hopefully, in the coming years in this AI-driven era, right? So as such, we do not advocate segregation of learners based on the different learner types, but rather a form of transformative pedagogy or transformative mindset, as Li Wei has called it in his plenary speech published in Language Teaching recently, which recognizes the possibility that individual learners indeed learn very differently, and they individually can benefit from different forms of learning support, such as the affordances and scaffolding that are provided by the e-learning systems. And there are many that are available nowadays. So we are still calling for papers. This is I hope that this talk will officially initiate the launch of this, the formal launch of the new journal on individual differences in language education, in which actually, of course, you can submit papers to us. Different types of papers are welcome, and also including book reviews, right? So these are the books that we have published in the past 20 years. You are more than welcome to look at them or to search for them in Amazon. And these are the journals that quite many of them are co-edited with Mohammed and Richard Sparks. So I hope that you can contribute to our continuous call for paper as well. And I wish to thank you all for your attention. And that's it. Bye-bye.